I need a few things to be read before I start tonight. Let me look find it for you. I don't want you to do that. I need. All right. We'll get Christy to read 1 John chapter 2, verse 3 and 4 when we get there. We'll get Ginger to read James chapter 1, verse 26. And then we need, let's see here, Tony, Psalms 111, verse 9. We'll get Roger Cook to read Judges 2 and 20. Make sure I'm not missing some more. And then we need,
You say 11 verse 9?
Psalms 111,
Oh, 111.
verse 9. And
I was
then
gonna say.
Roger Gibbons, we need you to read Genesis 9, verse 11. And we'll get Robert Cook to read Genesis 17, verses 2 through 4. We'll give Rick Turner Exodus 34:10. And we'll give Karen Psalms 89, 3 and 4.
89 what?
Psalms 89, verse 3 and 4.
What was mine again?
You had Exodus 34:10. Now I want y'all to be prepared tonight that if at any time during this class Karen tries to do something such as lay down on the floor and tell us that she cannot see, someone please go over there and tell her to open her eyes. She did that this week, didn't she? In the driveway, right?
I couldn't see.
Well, if you'd opened your eyes, you could have. But I told Christy what to do the next time she does that. Y'all wanna know what I told her?
What?
I said, go outside, grab some dirt out of the flower pot, spit on it, rub it all over her face, and tell her to go to the river. And wash 7 times. Well, if dirt's dirt, find it somewhere. Mud, whatever you got, rub it, spit on it, and wipe it on her face, and tell her to go down there and wash 7 times. And we'll see how she gets to the water. That'd be Sunday school lesson. Huh?
There's a ditch across the road.
Whatever you got. Use whatever means necessary. So, in our efforts tonight of what we're looking at, I want to ask you some questions first before we go into our study. So, first thing I want to know is, we're going to look at this 2 ways. I want to ask you 2 questions first. The first question I want to ask is, if you were going to join this church, what questions would you want to have answered? If you were going to join this church, what questions would you want?
If you've never
to
been here
have
before or knew nothing about it.
Well, even if you came 2 months, 3 months, whatever. But what questions would you want to know about this, about joining this church? I'm gonna make some notes so I keep up. What would you want to know if you was gonna join this church? Nobody apparently wants to know anything before they join the church.
Well, I would need to know that it was out of King James Version.
Okay. Anything else? What would you want to know? What questions would you want an answer to before you joined this church?
Say here to 18.
Huh?
Do they adhere to the 18 articles of faith?
Okay, adhere to the 18 articles of faith. What else? Anything else you would want to ask or have an answer to? before you joined? That you can think of. Okay? Number 2 question. You be thinking on that one, you can always throw something in when it comes to you. The other question I've got is, what questions do you think the church should ask somebody that wants to join? What questions should the church be asking somebody that wants to join?
Experience of grace.
Okay?
Do they believe in the Trinity?
Okay? What else?
They believe as we believe.
Okay? Anything else?
Yeah.
What do you think the church should ask somebody that wants to join? Go ahead, Roger. I know it's right there on TV time. Go ahead. Just go ahead and tell us.
I'm gonna be saved.
Okay? Anything else?
Are you a troublemaker?
From now on, when someone joins, we're gonna call on Roger to ask that question. Been in any trouble?
Did not ask Lois that one, huh?
You want?
Did not ask Lois that one.
No, you don't wanna ask, what was that one? That went bad.
She just Lois.
She denied it, or said sometimes, so it
Yeah.
just depends. So, those are 2 things. First, what would you want to know and ask before you join a church? And then turn around and say, what do you feel the church should ask somebody that wants to join the church? So then we look at it, let's just look at a perspective for a moment. So, out of that information that we've gathered, what are some things you feel that the church should know about somebody that wants to join? What do you think the church should know about it?
Do they wanna work?
If they want to work, okay,
Are they dedicated?
okay. Anything else? Anything else that you think the church should know about somebody that wants to join? What is something typically the church does ask somebody if they come up Sunday morning, so they like to join the church? What is something that they ask? That is asked. Okay, so they're asked if they belong somewhere else, if they have a letter. What else do they ask? Do we ask anything else?
I wouldn't, so I don't know.
I know Steve does. I know he asks.
Been
Give
baptized.
their experience of salvation.
Okay, so then we're gonna get a testimony of experience. You'll have them tell the church where they got saved or when. Okay. Anything else we want to know?
You have to be baptized.
Yeah. Okay, that's one. So one of the things that we screen across the board, and there's a reason why I'm going down this road. You're gonna see it in a minute. Learn why. But anybody that comes up to the church and asks to join, we have to know not only their experience or testimony, then we also then have to ask a specific question of where were you baptized? Now, everybody thinks that's generalized, and I'll give you some real good ballpark answers here in a minute. But you know that some churches do not have the authority to baptize people? And if that is where you got baptized, we will not take you in on your baptism.
What kind of churches?
You're going to get drowned a second time, huh?
What kind of churches?
Catholics is a great one. Because Bob Zavateri has got the paper in his Bible of when he was baptized as what? A baby. A baby. He was baptized into the church as a member as a baby. That is not authorized. And we're going to see why in just a minute. A very good explanation of why that is not allowed nor acceptable. The first thing is that we, in our doctrine as a Baptist church, specifically identify the believer's baptism. And that believer's baptism is done by what?
Mercy.
So you have to be head to toe covered in water. Now, I feel like there's some that we should hold down longer than others. I mean, we should really wash it off of them. Just keep them under there. Huh?
You talking about Rick?
No, not yet. So, but the truth is that if you, now pay attention, this is very simple stuff, we just don't pay attention to catch it. We require a believer's baptism. Well, in order to be a believer, you have to be saved. We do not baptize anybody into the church for any other reason except by believers' baptism. You find a lot of church doctrine and a lot of church manuals and other things that studied about churches that the Baptist church specifies believers' baptism. Because at the Catholic Church, they want you to be baptized into the church as soon as possible. And however they do it, I have seen those Catholic Church videos where they take the baby by the feet and they dip them, 3 or 4 times. And then, the Methodists, they sprinkle. Somebody sprinkles, I don't remember who. But there's all these forms of baptism. However,
Certain Catholics.
the sprinkle?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
so,
fine.
so,
Greek Orthodox Catholic,
Yeah.
they're the only ones I reckon still believe in immersion in water.
okay. So, the problem with that is they don't even have the authority to baptize, because if they were baptizing any whatsoever biblically, then there's no belief, there's no salvation, there's no testimony. Therefore, that is not a believer's baptism. So therefore, we do not accept it. That is not acceptable. That's not something that we would take in. The next thing that you counteract when someone wants to join the church is a very familiar statement that always speaks about they have to come from a church of like faith and order. Now, this is a good example of explanation to see what that actually means. An identical, fundamental doctrine. I put it in there twice, don't know why. Shared belief in core tenets such as the divinity of Christ, salvation through faith, and the authority of Scripture. And then the order of how things are done, the structure such as their government, their ministry roles, and the administration of ordinances and sacraments. Can you tell me, and I'll give you a good one, can you tell me an example of a Baptist church that would not be in like faith and order with ours? Not the name of the church, but something a church would do or allow that would not be of like faith and order.
Woman preacher.
Okay? Women preachers. What else?
You talking about Baptist or any of them?
Just like faith and order to us. That anything that's not practiced in our type of structure.
Somebody that's been married divorced, preach.
Okay? Or deacons, whatever it may be. They've been married 4 or 5 times. That's another example. So if one comes through the door from a church that practices that, then they are not of like faith and order. Therefore, guess what they're coming in by? What are we going to do with them?
That's brought, take testimony of faith and baptism.
They come in by statement, and they get baptized again because they are not of like faith and order. Now, Roger, Lois, Rick, and Tony, and Carolyn, you all got rebaptized, didn't you?
Yeah.
They're right? Yeah. So they came from Free Will Baptist. When you joined the Free Will Baptist from Red Oak, did they send a letter?
They did from Dunlap.
They sent one from Dunlap to the Free Will Baptist, right? So when you come back, it's when you all join back from a Free Will Baptist here to Missionary Baptist when you all got rebaptized, right? Yeah. Because like faith and order was the difference in, and this is what's funny, is even the Free Will Baptist doctrine believes those 3 cores. It's no different, is it not? And when you get into order and structure, they could still have the same order and structure and allow women to do things or people to be married 5 times. Whether or not that's considered a different denomination, I'm not even going to say that because we've got Missionary Baptists farther apart than we do maybe some Free Will Baptists or Primitives or whatever they are. That building by building changes. But primarily in fellowship, this is used as an agreement on the church's doctrine and the looking at how it's governed and the fact that the person's had a believer's baptism. And like example is we accept a letter of transfer from another Baptist church that holds similar views on baptism, salvation, and congregational governance. If they are governed and operating the same as we do, we'll take a letter from them. That's the acceptance of like faith in order. Now, I want you to think for a moment. We're taking members in. People are joining the church. Now, this is what we're talking about for most people joining the church. If you have a professional athlete, and you know they have the event that they call signing day. Everybody know hear that? The signing day. Karen's still getting ready to do one. She's gonna have a signing day. She's gonna do something for the NBA or one of them. I don't know yet. She's gonna be laying on the floor going. She's going to do jump ball, and so you just can't see it. So one of the things that's interesting to me is that what happens when these pro athletes or if somebody signs professionally with a college, what happens when they sign that contract?
They're under obligation to play for them.
Okay, what else? What else is in that contract? Anybody ever looked at one? You never looked at one? You might be interested in one when you see it. It'd be easier for some of us to get in there than probably the players. But in that contract, they actually have some things included, and it's an expressed agreement that includes on and off field or off court behavior and expectations. And it also emphasizes several things that it mandates an adherence to the policy and limits the prohibition of illegal things that they do not allow under the contract. And I'll give you some easy examples of just, this is an example of a contract with a pro player. They cannot do activities that bring disrepute to the team or league, including violence, illegal substances, criminal acts. They are required to exhibit professionalism, avoiding bullying or intimidation, and respecting their coaches, officials, and opponents. The obligations to prioritize the team's success and all mandatory meetings, practices, and games, and maintain high personal character. And adherence to all local, state, and federal laws, as well as their specific league-wide personal conduct policies. Then you get into the fact that if they breach it, they not only get penalized, they get fines and termination of the contract, which voids the guaranteed money. They're out. Then you get into the actual behaviors that you see all these things listed. This is typically by words, very, very common words right here that you see. What is the purpose in this being in that contract? What is the overall purpose for having that in a contract to an athlete that's going to sign to play for? Why would they want to do that?
Because they're representing the school.
Yeah. And they want to protect their own their reputation. So they're going to make you sign to do it. Now, does anybody remember, and I'll ask this before I let you see it, those of you that was prominent in your prime in the 1980s, do you remember the IBM dress code? You remember that when IBM had the computer coming out and they had their own dress code? So they had a dress code. I'll let you see this in the 1980s for all their salesmen. And this is how specific it was. Suits and ties, or acting as penguins, reflecting a strict conformity designed to match the corporate look of customers. They had to have dark pinstripe suits, white shirts, wingtip shoes, and muted power ties. Facial hair was forbidden. Clothing was aimed at presenting a unified professional image. Women, dark blue or black business suits. Grooming standards that were highly scrutinized, reflecting the suit mentality for all corporate staff. New employees often attended training that included strict dress for success guidelines to enforce these cultural norms. And towards the end of the decade, while still formal, debates on dress codes and began as other companies started allowing more casual, business casual styles, with some departments introducing the casual Fridays. This is what you would have seen if you'd have seen the IBM salesmen. The IBM salesmen were all in them dark suits because that was the mandated dress code that they wore in the 1980s by IBM. IBM done this for one whole purpose. They wanted a certain image, look, and feel to the reputation of their salesmen. Did they not? Did you all have the vacuum reps come to your door trying to sell you a vacuum? What did they wear? Because they had a dress code, like Rainbow vacuums, all them. They had a dress code, and it was a common practice to underscore this policy because they wanted to be represented by who was standing on your front door getting ready to be a salesman of their product. And that was their reputation. So in the 80s, it was very commonly to see all the IBM salesmen dressed identical. There's the same common practice going on in all the agreements, contracts, things that go between people today that answer this same exact thing of who are we saying that we are, who we identify as, and how the public message and identification relate in regards to how we live. That is commonly practiced as to what we do. Now, that's easily said and done if we look at it as a whole. A lot of policies, this is common practice in a lot of policies today. There's only one problem with that we've got going on in 2026. Now, one of the things that's common going on in 2026 is this one model term right here. This is where the line gets really stopped real quick. Okay, who had James 1:26?
What's me?
Is that you? Go ahead and tell us what that said.
If any man among you seems to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain.
So you're saying that you're something that you're not, and you're deceiving yourself right off the bat, meaning your religion is all in vain. All right, 1 John chapter 2. Who had those verses? What did it say?
And hereby we do know that we know him, if we keep his commandments. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him.
So we do know that we know him if, keyword, if we keep his commandments. This is all modeled by the very common statement of practice what you preach. Is it not? Is that not what it is? That's how we know him. You keep the commandments. That all ties us into the MBA special contracts, the contracts with the employers that enforce all the codes. And then we come down to the hot church one, the hot church code that we lay ourselves right into. And we've got one. Now, how many churches have you ever been in that did not have a covenant on the wall? Several don't have one on the wall. I'm assuming they have the adoption of the church covenant, but I don't know that. I don't know what they've adopted. But there are churches you go in that there's no church covenant on the wall. Is it required to have it on the wall? No, there's no requirement to have it on the wall. It's, I think, better practice that it's on the wall for everybody to see, especially for anybody that's coming in that is new or wants to identify things in the church that kind of plays them into seeing and hearing and feeling what the church is and what they're doing. But when we look at various things, and I'll just give you some easy examples here for a minute. What does the word covenant mean?
Agreement.
Okay? There's a word before that. It is an agreement, but there's a specific word before that when we define a church covenant. Well, that's probably it, but the Bible dictionary says it's a solemn agreement. It is binding. And it all holds us to the basis of our relationship with God first. And when we look at that being between the members of the church, that they walk together according to the precepts of the gospel in brotherly affection. And what I like about that very definition in the Bible dictionary is that a solemn agreement between members. Okay. Here's what I want you to think about this. Now, you could be like Roger. Roger's been in the church for so long that, some of them's probably built their building back 3 times as long as he's been in church. And he is under the exact same covenant as Dylan, who joined a couple weeks ago. So Roger's been under the covenant for hundreds of years, and Dylan's been under it for a few years. And joining here in this covenant, if it's the same as what they had to go to church, this covenant, he's been a few days. Now, all have entered into agreement with each other about the things that are listed in the church covenant. I want you to notice one thing, though, about covenants. Let's start there for a moment. Break this down to some things we need to know and understand. First of all, when a covenant is made or promises are kept in any form, we always need to learn that God set the standards of the covenant. There is no man-made standards set in our church covenant. We can break it down line by line and show you everything in it to Bible reference. And if you look at it biblically, it will line that way up. I'll give you an example. So Tony had Psalms 111 and 9. What does that say?
He sent redemption unto his people. He hath commanded his covenant forever. Holy and reverend is his name.
He's commanded his covenant forever. See, God is the one that sets the standards of the covenant. Judges 2 and 20. What did it say? Yeah, 2 and 20.
The anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he said, because that this people have transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and have not hearkened unto my voice.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So he says here, in other words, that since that the nation has transgressed against my covenant, that means God made the covenant that he commanded to the fathers. That means that there's mutual obligation. God has an obligation to keep. We have an obligation to keep. But who determines what those obligations are?
God.
God. We don't set the obligations or the standards. We don't set none of that. He comes to the covenant knowing what is best for us, and we come to trust and obey or not at all. That's how the covenant works. Because covenant between God and man, God sets the obligations every time. But God also, if you think about it, he puts himself under obligation with promises. Because does he not promise things if you do what he commands? So he does obligate himself to promises to you. The glory of God's covenant with man is that God also puts himself under obligation with promises. And an easy example is Genesis 9:11. What did that verse say?
And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth.
Who did God say that to?
People,
Noah.
Noah.
Yeah, because he was talking about that never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Okay, Genesis 17 verses 2 through 4. What did it say?
And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abraham fell on his face. God talked with him, saying, And as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations.
So there's one that God told Abraham, who had Exodus 34:10. What did that one say?
And he said, Behold, I make a covenant before all the people. I will do marvels, such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation, and all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord, for it is a terrible thing that I will do with thee.
This one God gave to Moses. And then Psalms 89:3 and 4. What did it say?
I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David my servant. Thy seed will I establish forever, and build up thy throne to all generations.
So this one was an example covenant that God gave to David. That's another example. So the glory of God's covenants with man is that God obligates himself with promises. He's obligating himself by promising this if you follow his commands. If Noah built the ark, he would save him and who? His family. If he did not do what God said, and obeyed and trusted that the flood was coming, he would have drowned the same as anybody else. That's just plain and simple. God obligates himself with the promises he's got to keep when you go under mutual obligation for trusting and obeying what he has commanded. Now, all of this covenant, now we're using this word covenant, the church covenant, that's what we're going off tonight and we're studying on. I want you to think about the fact that this is a promise that is made to God, it is made to the church, and then it's made to yourself. You have promised God that you will do what that covenant says.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have also looked at it as yourself you will do, as well as other members that you will do with the covenant and act, engage to practice as you do in agreement. Now you look at, let me see right here if I've got it. Yeah. So in summary, I'm gonna ask anybody in here who wants to give me a statement. But if I asked you to give me 1 to 2 sentences that summarize our church covenant, what would you tell somebody? If you had to summarize the church covenant in 1 to 2 sentences and give it out to someone, what would you say? None of these are said and done, but it's not. If we understand it, it's not that hard. First thing we would say, if I pointed the covenant to someone that had never seen it, hadn't joined, whatever, the first thing I'm going to say is this is how we believe. Church covenant, this is how we believe. This is how we promise to live. Right there. Not how we think, but how we say we are going to live. This is a concise summary on how we are agreeing to live by this covenant. That we will and will not do the things in the covenant. But who are we committing to in the church covenant?
God,
And?
everybody.
And? Ourselves. Me, myself, and I, the church, and God.
Yeah.
That's the 3 joining things that's in the binding that Robert was talking about, the binding agreement. That's the 3 things that we are committed to, and we're getting into agreement. If you wanted to look at what is an ethical statement, what is an ethical statement tonight? Anybody know what ethical code is if you have a job? Anybody know? Ethical code? Typically, and we're looking at the church covenant tonight, a series of written pledges. These are Bible-based written pledges. The members who join this church are voluntarily making a pledge to God, the members of this church, and who? Themselves. Moral and spiritual commitments and practice of their faith. How we act is our ethics. If you want to make it in layman's terms, how we act is our ethics. What we say is good, and how we live up to it, it's got to be good. How we apply our view to each aspect of our lives is included in the covenant. Because ethics is all about a studying of what is good and what is right. That's what ethics are. It's all about the study of what's good and what's right. So it's implied by the church covenant. If you join this church tonight, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, whatever, if you join at any time in the church service, it is implied that we are held accountable to what is in the covenant that this church adheres to. Is that right? That's what's implied. If we're opposing something, and I'll give you an easy example. If someone says, well, I think it's fine to drink alcohol when I'm at home, I think it's okay to have a drink every now and then. How does that line up with our church covenant? So now you're violating. Now you're in violation. You are not practicing what you agreed to. You are not living up and practicing what you preach. We got a problem because now we're not adhering to it. There is another purpose of the job of the church covenant that really is good and gets everybody out of having to do it themselves. And that's one of the biggest things we get into is discipline and accountability. Discipline and accountability is all coming practice from our church covenant. Because that is what that's how we believe, that's what we're adhering to, that's what we're pledging and promising we're gonna do and live by, and how we're gonna deal with others, and what all we're gonna do. Now, I do have a question for you. It's time for a trivia question. I know Roger's excited. Does baptism make a person part of a particular church?
No.
No? Why not? Everybody has to be baptized to be in the church. You mean that baptism does not make a person part of a particular church?
No.
Why?
Because to God, it's all one church, not one particular church. It's not like saying only Missionary Baptist Church, Indian Creek Missionary Baptist Church is going to heaven.
Okay.
Baptism is part of the family of Christ.
Mhm.
That's we're saved, we're supposed that's give us straight to the world. We died out to the world and we rose, live a new life in Christ Jesus. So
Okay.
that has nothing to do with church membership.
No.
Though we require baptism to be a member of the church.
That's a requirement. But it doesn't make you a member of a particular church. There's nothing in that baptism that makes you a part of a particular church. Now, I want you to, now that we've got that established, and everybody in the room has heard, you all heard that answer? That baptism doesn't make a person part of a particular church. Okay. So, people that are members of a church should be people that are saved, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
By history, in the 15 and 1600s, people started realizing that out of the Catholics movement, coming out of that into the Baptists, they started realizing that people should only be in the church that is people that are saved. That's what they started realizing. That is where the words regenerate church membership comes in. Regenerate church membership is what we actually practice as a Baptist church, meaning that you have been regenerated. Those are those that have been made alive and have came out of death. That is regenerate church membership. There was a model covenant made in Massachusetts in 1649. I pulled this up so I can remember. And I want you to hear what it said. This was the model church covenant that was constructed in 1649. God will for his people to gather in visible local churches. Visible union cannot be established by just mere faith. Faith is invisible. It cannot be by bare profession of faith. It cannot be by just people in the same area. Now, this is in the original church covenant by history when it was wrote. And then another one, it couldn't be by baptism because that doesn't make them part of a particular church. We don't think you need to be baptized more than once. Do we? Do we? How many times y'all been baptized? Two. Okay. What establishes a visible union of believers in a particular body is made by a covenant. We have all agreed together to the covenant. This is the common thing that holds all bodies together. The opposing part is the Catholic Church that is wanting people to be part and in their church as soon as they are born. Which is Bob Zavatiri's got his paper. He always talks about that paper of baptism in the Catholic Church. Now that we've established that you don't need to be baptized more than once, and we've now identified that you all have agreed that baptism doesn't make you a part of any particular church, I'm now going to give you a scenario that's going on in churches right here. And I want you to tell me what the answer is to this. So, in our current detention facilities, they're baptizing people who have gotten saved. Now, they come in here Sunday morning and say, my name is so-and-so, and I've been released from jail. But while I was there, I got saved and got baptized. What would we ask them at that very point? What would we want to know? What do you think we should ask them?
When did they get saved?
Okay, they tell you.
Uh-huh.
And then they say that same week, I got baptized with 14 others in the jail. This right here is in Bible, but Claiborne County Jail does the same thing. I got pictures of it, I just couldn't find it. It goes on, y'all see it on Facebook where they baptize people in the jail? first of all, there's about 10 people there from probably 10 different churches. None of them are the same denomination. None of them have the same doctrine or bylaws. None of them operate under any of the same pretenses, but they're all there in the jail ministry. And these people have gotten saved, and now they are baptized, and you can see with proof that they are fully immersed. Everybody agree with that? They are fully immersed, same as what we do here, right? And they've now walked in our door and say, I was saved. They give their experience, and they also have a certificate of baptism, which we also do here. And it is signed, dated, and witnessed. What are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with that? Because we just said that baptism has no part of a particular church. So then my question comes up, is there a difference in the water that they're using and the water that we're using?
No.
No? That's not true, Ginger. They get theirs out of Canyon Creek
Well-
Lake.
I've heard some people
But,
being rebaptized because they was baptized in the baptistry, not in the river. But they
Yeah.
say it has to be moving.
there are some that require, yeah, absolutely, I've heard of that. But my question comes up to this is that if your church membership, if the requirement to be a member is that you are of salvation by grace experience, you have been baptized by a believer's baptism, which is the believing of full immersion of water in a body of water. And that's all been done. And you walk in the door and you're ready to join. Why do we need to rebaptize?
Gotta know the rules.
Huh?
You got to know the rules.
Well,
Of the church.
I get that, but the baptizing don't put them to the rules.
But you gotta teach them or set them
Mhm.
aside to see that
I agree with
they
that.
do.
I do. I agree with that. You know, churches that we take members in from right here will let those people join by statement. And they require no baptism. They do not make them get rebaptized. Because,
Here?
huh?
They do that here.
Not in this church.
I was
In
gonna say.
churches that we will take a letter from.
Oh, okay.
They will let them join by statement and without requiring any baptism, because they already can prove that they were baptized. There's all the proof you want, video, pictures, all of it, witnesses, they got a certificate of baptism. Some of these churches involved are Baptist churches, but they have no membership and they have no letter because they didn't join a church. They got saved and they got baptized, okay? You see the separation here we're at? But they walk in our door and say, I'd like to join this church. And they say, okay, well, we'll set you aside for baptism. I don't need that. I've done got it. Let me show you. Pull their certificate out and hand it to you. It's the same thing we use. They don't have a letter.
Yeah.
But they've been saved and they've been baptized. What are we going to do?
Give them a covenant.
Okay? But what action will the church take on those people to bring them in the body as a member?
Well, they have to agree with the covenant.
They do. They say, oh, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. We give them a copy of the doctrine and bylaws, and they say, that's fine. I understand. I agree. That's okay. I'm still willing to join. Huh?
Welcome.
Welcome in. So why do we require them to be baptized again?
I don't understand it.
No,
Huh?
no, that's about this.
Well, we've done it,
I'm baptized at Dunlap.
Huh?
I still like to
Yeah,
baptize. I
right?
had to get baptized again.
When you joined from the freeway, came back, they baptized you again. But why do we need to do that if you've done been baptized? When you got saved, you were baptized into a missionary Baptist church.
Yeah.
What does that water do that lets you into the door? Because that doesn't tie you to the church. I've been asking this a long time, but I want to know because we got them now coming into churches. They're getting saved in the jail. Wonderful. They get out and they find them a church or somebody they know that goes to church or whatever, and they come through the door. What do you think it would do to you to think, I want to be part of this now, and I want to be part of something that's going to help me and do good, and I want to have a life that means something, so on and so forth. You walk through the door and you find out that you got saved the same way everybody else did, and you got baptized the same way everybody else did, but they're not going to use it. Accept it. They won't take that.
Different churches have different doctrines. Could that be part of it?
They're not in church. They don't have a
Well,
membership.
Whoever was preaching to them.
I mean, and then what if they say, he read the King James Bible? Same thing I had.
Well, he says that, but you don't know.
I don't know. But that draws the line to when you say that baptism don't hold nothing to tie you to a particular church. And we should not be using that as to how we bring you in to the church. Except a thing or two. I'll get to a minute of defending this, but I just want you to think about that for a moment. If it don't tie you to the church and to any particular church, and these are baptized after getting saved, ordained, that's a Baptist pastor right there. He pastors a Baptist church. It doesn't that baptize. They are required by law, let me clarify this, they are required by law that a woman be with him to do baptizing of females. That is law.
But the woman ain't doing the baptism.
No, that's Jonathan. He's a Baptist pastor in Miller. That baptizes that woman right there. But by law, they have to have a woman.
Like, you know, there's women baptized, people baptized.
Oh, yeah. That'd be a different story if that's who signed it. But he signs it, and he even puts his name in what church he's from. But they're not coming as a member or with a letter from that church. They're coming as a released inmate. And they're coming after being saved and baptized. They don't have a church. They have been saved and they have been baptized. What are we gonna do there?
Well, does that make them a member of this church?
If he joins,
They have to be baptized to join.
that's why I'm asking you, why do they? Because you just told me that doesn't tie them to a church.
Now, I asked Steve the same question and I didn't get an answer, so.
Well, we should know the answer to that. I believe we should know this stuff because this is gonna get very prevalent. But you know what'll turn them away quicker than anything? Is when you can't tell them why. When they look at you and say, I wanna know why I have to do it again when I've done it. I've done it. I've done this. And I've done been saved and baptized. And they can walk you through it step by step. They can tell you everything that was said and done, testimony, baptism, and all. How can you look at them and say, well, you gotta do it again?
I just did it because they asked us to.
Why do you do it in the first place?
Because it's commandments, biblical commandment to be baptized.
Why did Jesus do it?
Why did he do it?
Why did he get baptized?
Well, first of all, we're doing this to show the world. Moreover, I want to say it's more to show those in the church, more than the world, that we have not only became a new creature and been changed. Any of y'all want to pitch in and help me here on this one? But we're showing that as a visible testimony. This is why I'm telling you, as the 1649 covenant said, that you do not take them in just by mere faith, because that's invisible. And by profession of faith, and that alone was not enough. Therefore, the baptism, the believer's baptism, was what they went to establish that representation of their experience. God commands you to be saved and then be baptized. So you're doing a 50% work there following commandment just to get saved and not get baptized, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? So if you're following his commandment to show the world that you have died out to sin and you have been washed clean into a new creature, that's what the representation of baptism is. We'll get into studying that some other time. But if you're doing that and it's the same right there, and I can go back and watch the video and see he baptized her and he pastors a Baptist church, blah, blah, blah. Don't matter that he got a letter, but he walks in the door and I said, that is no different than what we would have done here if it happened here. Then what are we going to do? That's always the question I have. I never forget this one time. And this happened, David Bolton was pastoring a church. It's been years back. And they had a man join that came in by statement. And David asked him in front of the whole church, I remember this well. He told him his name, I don't remember his name. He said, when you got baptized, he said, who baptized you? He said, the pastor of the church where I went. It didn't exist anymore. That's what it was. It didn't exist anymore. And there was no letter to send. And David said, okay, so when they baptized you, after he done told his testimony, David said, when you got baptized, he said, how much of your body got wet? He said, the whole thing. He said, they dumped me under, and put me completely under and brought me back up. He said, so you got immersed from the tip of your head to the soles of your feet? Absolutely. And he turned around and looked at that church and he said, you tell me the difference in the water in this baptistry and what I would do to him again than what he's done experienced. And nobody had an answer. And so David said, we're not doing it. We're not rebaptizing nobody. It's already done. The believer's baptism by Bible. They've done that. If it's not tying you to a church, then there's no need in redoing it. That practice by Bible ordinance, that would be the same as telling, in my opinion, if Robert come in Sunday morning and say, my name is Robert Cook, and I was saved in the Methodist Church in Jonesville, Virginia, and I'd like to join this church. And we look at him and say, well, you got to get saved again. Because God commanded you to be saved and baptized, but you didn't do it in the Baptist church, so you're going to have to do it again. That's the same in my mind, picturing the salvation and baptism. Full immersion. That experience in itself, both salvation and baptism, is not tied to church membership. So if you come in without a letter, that's what these are doing. You come in without a letter, what stance does that put us to say that we need to redo it and do it over? Are we saying that that baptism is not valid? That the Lord wasn't pleased with that, and we don't agree to that? How do we say that? What do we have in defense?
Did you say a moment ago that a baptism ties the person to the church?
No,
I misunderstood.
the question is this. Does baptism make a person part of a particular church?
But did you say that a moment ago? Did you say that one? I ain't asking about the question.
That's what I said. We're going to go into it in just a moment. But this is always the mind-boggling thing. What is our rules here about a person that comes to our church, wants to join, and doesn't have a letter from a church we can't get?
Taken by state.
We take them by state. But we don't have that.
We set them aside.
But we take them by statement.
Mhm.
And they're put on the books as a member.
Not till they're voted on.
But one time, there won't be no letter coming. Motion and a second, we take them in, all in favor say aye.
But
It's right in.
You got ones that you're gonna be try to keep them where they should be.
Mhm.
If we
But-
see them out in the bar or
Right,
coming out of the
yeah,
bar, then
I agree.
we,
But if Robert joins this Sunday morning by statement, the minute that motion is second and all in favor say aye, he's a member. Right then. There's no such time set aside. Now, if we're waiting on a letter of recommendation from a sister church, you're pending letter. Well, you're not a member until that letter's brought in and we make action on it and take you in. But when you come in by statement, it's active. Right then. We don't have a watch care period on those that are not pending letter. And our bylaws say that you can come in if the church burned, destroyed, abolished, disassociated, whatever, and you come join this one, and there's no way to get letter or anything else, we can take you by state.
Statement of faith.
That's right. That's right.
Wonder why they had us be baptized again.
Because you're so mean. You always
I
run,
know that.
you always running the lowest, and we know why. I mean, but now all seriousness, and then Roger's sitting here, you all was in the Free Will Baptist how long in Michigan?
Oh, I don't know.
for us,
Wow. You did.
22
I did.
years.
It's over 20 years.
Yeah.
No.
Did they believe that you had to be saved?
Yep.
Did they not believe you had to be baptized?
But we didn't have to be baptized again.
No, but they believed
Yeah.
that if
Oh, yeah.
someone got saved, they had to be baptized, right?
Yep.
Head to toe, full immersion. Yeah. And they were a member of the church, right? A Baptist church. That was a Free Will Baptist church. So the question I always come into is when we take these people and we examine the situation, I can't argue that I've preached in some of the Free Will Baptist churches. Roger's been with me. There is no difference in their doctrine than what's right here, is there not? I've said on a lot of it when I worked. I used to go over there when I worked.
No different, just, some of the practices are different.
But outside of that, there's no differences in that doctrine and what's here. And we've been in a lot of services in the Free Will Baptist around, and the men that are preaching are very qualified. There's no problem with any of them. They're not allowing nothing that we wouldn't allow here. They could come here and preach. Well, Steve's family member that pastored a Free Will, and then he went to Methodist. Remember that bald-headed guy he had preached here a couple of years ago with his family out toward Nashville? You know, he ain't Baptist, he ain't missionary Baptist. But if that man joined, to come in and say, I've already been saved and I've been fully immersed in water. Is it not my statement?
Roger, we got baptized in a missionary Baptist church, all of us, but Then we joined the
joined the
Free Will
Free Will.
Baptist.
Right.
We didn't have to get baptized.
Right.
But when we came back, they asked us to be baptized.
Yeah.
That was a requirement.
And my thing is, and just this been speaking from just what I study and know, but if salvation's the same and it's all one church and all one faith and one baptism,
Don't
then
believe,
how can I tell you yours ain't valid?
don't believe you.
Huh?
They don't believe us. They don't believe you. If you say you're baptized.
Yeah.
You gotta be baptized.
You gotta do it, but how can I do it when you see my son?
Why would you even say that to be a member? If they didn't believe you to start with.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
In
This
that-
side over here's been quiet tonight. Y'all go ahead and get into it. You want? Go ahead.
Matthew 3 and verse 14, where Jesus was talking to John the Baptist was talking, it says, but John forbade him, saying, I have need to be baptized of thee, and comest thou to me? And Jesus answered and said unto him, suffer it to be so now, for this it is becometh us to fulfill all righteousness. Now, if it was, he said for us,
Mhm.
to the best of our ability, we're to be baptized to fulfill all righteousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's commanded to be baptized. But I always come up to that question of, and this is just the easy example I'm using, but this is a valid one. What if, I want to give this an example, what if this is Rick and Tony's niece?
Right.
And they were there and seen about it. They got to go see the niece get baptized. And now she's standing up asking to join the church. How do we say we're not accepting that? That's not that. How do we do that? And we'll see more in just a minute. So when we look at a lot of things, one of the things we get to is that a covenant in itself is calling us to live and act different in the agreements of being held accountable. So, don't do this. Do these things. Don't do this. I should expect this group of people to come to me if I don't do this. If I don't follow, if I'm in the bar. Now, I'm gonna ask this question. If I call you tonight and send you a picture of one of our members sitting in the bar, because I got word from somebody they were there and I went and found them, what are y'all gonna do?
Why was you there?
Question.
We have
Go ahead.
north.
Yeah.
His brother was alcoholic.
Mhm.
And I guess he called him from the bar and said, will you come and get me?
Yeah.
Maybe was right.
Somebody seen him?
Went to,
Well, I don't know.
But he went and got him?
Yeah, he went, no, he did.
No, go ahead.
he went to the bar and he wouldn't go inside the bar.
But he knocked on the door?
Bring his brother out to him.
Mhm.
Remember that?
From the Lord.
There, if you all look up, I think his name's Phil Kidd, he pastors Emmaus in Kingsport. He walks right in the bars. He rides his motorcycle to the bar and goes right in and sits down at the bar and sits right there and talks to him.
Well, Jesus said he does.
Publicans,
Well, not
sinners.
Jesus.
I met Phil.
He does, he goes in the bars, he sits right down at the bar and talks to all them boys over while they drink.
That's what Jesus did. He went in.
It don't bother him one bit. And he actually has several that have came out of that lifestyle into church. I don't know if they've joined the church, but he's got several that have came because he walked in that place. He didn't do anything out of respect to him, but he walked right in there and sit down right beside him and sit there and talk to him.
He testified to it.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be different than walking in there,
He's going to just point at him. No,
or
no.
going in there and and kind of accepting it.
no.
Say,
Yeah, right. I'm with you.
Saying,
Mhm.
I'm just like, let's kick back a few.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's entirely different.
Yep. He hosts, not off topic for a second, but he hosts a motorcycle ride, and you wouldn't believe the looks, some of them that come from all over to ride that church motorcycle ride. And he has a church service and a dinner on a Saturday when they do that ride. And they may be, I don't know, 200-300 motorcycle riders from all over come in to ride that thing. And his whole goal on that, he came from a very bad life history of addiction and problems himself and got to be a bad alcoholic himself. And so his whole point is that he can tell them, I've been there and I do know. I've done it, or I do know. And And that's exactly the ministry work that he's doing in those places and stuff. But we've got the expectation, we should have the expectation that if any of our members here, they should have the expectation that if they are caught somewhere in a place that is not approved by the church's covenant, that they will be contacted, that they're going to be contacted. Is that not fair? Is that wrong? Does anybody feel that's wrong? To call somebody and ask them, hey, I was sent a picture of you sitting at the bar. Tell me why. Is that wrong?
No.
No. I mean, we got to look at this as a practical point and statement. And who we say we are and how we live matters more than what we're playing to the life to act. And I'll tell you why. If the man walks in your room to do your surgery and says, I'm a doctor, do you not expect him to be qualified and licensed to be a physician?
Yeah.
And when the electrician comes because your house is about burnt down due to a short, do you not expect the man that's in there playing in your breaker box to have qualifications and be licensed to be who he says he is? Yes. You hope he's not YouTube certified. I'm serious. You expect these people to be who they say they are. That is no different than how I'll say this, that's no different how people that are out of church look at people that are in church. They're people that are unchurched and out of church right now, their view is that I'm no better than they are.
That's right.
I do no more than they did.
I've said that 1,000,000 times. Well, not 1,000,000.
It's common practice. And if that's what they see, that's what they believe.
If I saw it, I thought, well, I'm just as good as them. If they're going to heaven, I'll do like those ones.
I've always said this because I can remember this being said one time that you let a deacon say a cuss word. I'm just using it as an example because there used to be a church that had a deacon that everybody always called him the cussing deacon because he did, and it got back to him all the time. And I'm they're thinking that no wonder they've got no respect and no witness and no effect on their whole community because he's out doing as bad as the rest, and he's in that. If you're not who you say you are and doing what you say you do, how we live, it matters. Now, common practice is that there's always going to be, I'll finalize this for you, there's always going to be sin in the church because you live in this world, it's saturated. But the question is that the Gentiles, I want to give you an example. The Gentiles know in the Bible of things going on in the church. Paul wrote about the fornication going on in the church. The Gentiles knew that should not have been happening. Just the same as the world knows that should not be happening. So the church as a body under the one covenant agreement we're all under tonight is a testimony to everybody outside these walls. The church should look different and live different than what the world sees and knows. That should be the stuff. And they should look and say, these people don't think like we do. They don't do the things like we do. All the time that you get to that, one of the reasons for the covenant correcting sin, and this is always what I've looked about, is that people whose lives are characterized and are not committed to getting rid of it. That's where the discipline and accountability comes, is to those who have came in under the covenant and they're not committed to getting rid of the sins. Some people wouldn't have a problem with some things going on in the church, but guess what? Other people will. People will try to rationalize their sin and see it differently than the church does. Well, I'm drinking it. I'm drinking the alcohol so I can sleep, and I don't feel like that's a sin. Just because I drink every night, I don't feel like that's a sin. That's rationalizing away from what the church sees something different than what it actually really is. So the whole purpose in covenant, church covenant, as we look at this tonight, is that our discipline should be positive. Our whole goal is not to have the let's throw them out and kick them to the curb mentality. We're supposed to be protecting a person from deceiving themselves about their own spiritual state. That is exactly what we're supposed to be doing, is protecting a person from deceiving themselves about their own spiritual state and protecting the witness of the church in the community. Because one of the things the Bible tells us is that we are to go to restore a one back to a right relationship with who? And
Church.
the church. That's the whole point of the discipline in the church, is to restore them from deceiving themselves and believing a lie and living in a lie and get them back to the place. So by this very body's doctrine tonight, and I pulled this straight out of our bylaws as we start that, it says that this church recognizes only the Bible as authority in matters of Christian conduct, but as a practical statement, everybody's got a copy of this on the back of your papers, as a practical statement of Christian ethics, there's the word, by which the church shall expect its members to abide, the church recognizes the following church covenant. And the first paragraph is where I start with. This is the very first paragraph of the church covenant that we have. One of the first things it says is that having been led, as we believe, by the Spirit of God to receive the Lord Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, right there, simply acknowledging that our salvation is the result of divine work of God's Spirit to lead us to receive Jesus Christ. That's the first breakdown of that line. And on the profession of our faith, having been baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. There's the next one. As Baptists, we recognize that only those that have received Christ may become members of this church. The New Testament clearly teaches that baptism is an essential step of identification with and obedience to the Lord. Since we cannot, here's the key, I like this very statement I pulled. Since we can't see faith in any man's heart, we are limited to hearing his profession of faith in Christ and observing the obedience and submission to God in baptism. It is this public act which speaks to the spiritual reality of salvation, in by which we recognize those who belong to this church and who may rightly enter into this covenant. That is one that's been saved and comes before the church to be baptized. Next part of this is we do now in the presence of God, angels, and this assembly. It's certain true that we enter into this agreement by everybody that's here. God, the church, at all times. And you look at this, that the whole assembly of baptized believers who've become a part of the church, the biggest things you get into is that why does it mention the role of angels as witnesses to the covenant? Why does our covenant mention in parts? Because I don't see it in this one except it says the presence of God in this assembly. But we actually have in the Baptist the original covenant about angels. Why would it say that? Anybody know? I've not looked that up, but I did read on that in the history of the church covenant. Most solemnly and joyfully enter into covenant with one another as what? One body in Christ. So, a parallel to the church covenant for most of us is the covenant of marriage, where that people would get married with witnesses. You have to have witnesses sign the stuff and be witness to the marriage. And when you get into that and you start looking at it, we also enter into the covenant freely and without compulsion. To join the church, it's 100% voluntary. And fulfilling our obligations. We look at what we're doing. We're committing to the church. We're going under covenant to him, the church, and ourselves. And we see what we are doing so that we follow this covenant. Now, we're going to break some more down as we come forward in the next weeks. But I wanted us to first see some things, biblical background for a moment, so that we could start groundworks of how the covenant comes into play. But then responsibility comes on us to follow and make sure the others are following. I've thought about a lot about the fact that, and we said this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about church membership, and we said in the 70s and in the 90s, if you didn't show up after a Sunday or two, that somebody was at your door, or calling, right? That's what they said. And now in 2026, nothing. No efforts to restore that one back or to minister to them or to check in on the fatherless and the widows and so on. And that's a common practice now in churches, not just this one, most churches. They don't reach out and contact anybody. You're here, you're not. You know, some churches went to bank draft and you sign the form and they take your tithe out of the bank every week, whether you're there or not. I mean, they want to make sure they got it in case you didn't have it. But in reality, when we look at the church covenant, we look at the reasons for it, why we have it. There is a few gray areas that are left out there that are for us to have to make a decision on, and we have to look at those situations. But the baptism is a Bible commandment, a believer's baptism. We require it to become a candidate to join this church as a member. But we don't specify because you don't have a letter. Letter requires like, faith, and order, and a letter of recommendation. But if you're coming in by statement, then it's up to us if you have met requirements to be a member. And I always ask that question of if you were saved and baptized just like everybody was here, how does what roof you were under make the call? Because we said it does not tie you to a particular church. Pentecostal, that was the one I was thinking of. Holiness Church is Pentecostal. I don't know about up in Virginia, but in this area, you get saved and you get baptized. But they don't have membership.
Yeah.
But they baptize. Church of God, huh?
Church of God don't.
Yeah. So they don't baptize?
Yeah, they baptize,
Yeah.
but you don't get saved when you get baptized. You get saved.
Right. But I'm
Then
saying,
then you get baptized.
right. But I'm saying, like, Holiness Church, there's no such thing as being a member. They don't have church membership. A lot of holiness churches we have don't have a church membership. There's no such thing as a letter. They don't join and be a member of the church. The Church of God in Middlesboro areas practice that you get saved and you get baptized. After that, you can come and ask to join the church. But they require salvation and baptism first.
Yeah.
Then you come before the church as a candidate for baptism. And there are people in churches that are probably some of the best, perfect attendance church members we've ever had in churches in our area right now, Church of God, that's been there 30, 40 years and they've never joined. Amen.
My mom passed away and they had her funeral at the church. It was Mountain Assembly,
Yeah.
Pentecostal church.
Mhm.
And the pastor come down and said, I'm giving her this letter and put it in her casket
Mhm.
and said, and now she's a member going to heaven.
Yeah.
No longer member here, member
Yeah.
Member there.
Yeah. But until you come before that church and ask to join it, they say, when you get saved in their church, you get baptized. That's never part of joining the church.
No.
They do not practice that. You still, after baptism, you get a certificate of baptism. After that, you come before the body to ask to join.
Right.
That's what they
That's
practice.
right.
That's what we did when I did here. I didn't get saved here, but
No,
I
but
got
when you got
baptized
baptized,
and then I asked to be
you got the
joined.
right hand of fellowship.
And I asked to join the church.
Yeah. But you see the different separation, baptism, then you ask to join. See what I'm saying? That's why baptism, we're not tying to a particular body, a church. Baptism and the practice of itself is not tied to a particular church. Most people say, I was baptized at so-and-so. And they collectively feel and think that's part of their membership. Was I was saved and baptized? I got baptized at so-and-so. At whatever church. There is no ground tie to a believer's baptism to be part of your letter. When Tony sends a letter to another church, it don't say where they were saved and baptized, does it?
Yeah.
We don't tell that we baptize them. Well, they could have been baptized at the Holiness Church 65 years ago. It'll never say that.
Why don't you look straight at me when you say that?
Just checking it. But think about that for a minute. If you think about that for a minute, baptism, we collectively put all that together, but it doesn't go together. It don't really connect itself in time. We require a believer's baptism. What would we do if somebody got saved in the church and said, I'd like to be baptized? And we would baptize them,
Yeah.
but they never come and say they want to join the church. they're not a member just because we baptize them. Are they? No. What if they wait 5 years and come back and then say, I wanna join this church? I was saved and baptized here 5 years ago. And since then, I've been wherever, what church, blah, blah, blah. But I wanna join.
Would you accept them?
Correct.
I mean, like you say, if they, if the church baptized them, they went away for 5 years, they're still taken by the state
Mhm.
faith.
Yeah.
Where they was baptized at,
Mhm.
was believer baptism.
Right.
Yeah.
It'd be upon their testimony of faith.
Mhm. My whole thing on this is that biblical standards are easily, clearly defined. That it don't have to be so confusing. It's not hard to understand what we say baptism is, and if that's what's practiced, your salvation and baptism is the same as ours, and you're not coming from a church with the letters, then we take you in on statement. That doesn't tie to requiring you a baptism to be put into the church. Am I wrong?
Like I say, it depends on that line. you know,
Experience.
Believer
Right.
baptism.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, it's the reason why we baptized Catholic, because they were baptized. We worked for a Methodist,
Mhm.
and he was not satisfied with his baptism because he was just water poured over his person.
Right.
And he was, as they say in the Methodist, they baptize them as children,
Mm-hmm.
and then they affirm them at 12 years of age.
Yeah.
And he wasn't satisfied with that.
Right.
And he wanted to be rebaptized, and they were baptized.
Mm-hmm.
But he was convicted of his own self, like, he read the scriptures and stuff, and he was not convicted.
Mhm.
He was convicted that that baptism was not a believer's baptism.
Right.
He was baptized, even though the Methodists confirmed it.
Mm-hmm.
And see, that's another thing, like say, it comes down to that believer's baptism, and that testimony that they have,
Mhm.
believer's baptism.
We've had people that thought they were saved and baptized and realized later they weren't. Then they get saved and we do it again. Now that's a good reason to repeat because now it's a believer's baptism. That- that-
That's the first
Huh?
step of,
Do what?
That's how it is.
Right there, within 30 days.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
like I say, that's the first step of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, and I kinda like the way some preachers do it. When they baptize somebody, they say, upon their testimony of their faith in their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I baptize this, my brother or my sister, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Mhm.
They put that in front of it, and I thought that's good,
Mhm.
but it takes the first step is belief and
Yeah.
surrender your life to Christ.
Yep.
And then upon that belief and receiving Jesus Christ, then that first step, the next step is baptism.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I also see people, and I've seen this myself, I've been in church with people that have got up in revival until they just didn't feel satisfied with the baptism. And they want to do it again.
I say that's the problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen that.
yeah, I mean, people have done that. Where the line draws is that a statement is a statement. It don't matter where you're from, what you did. It lines right up with that biblical guideline of salvation. And that belief of the salvation then from the testimony to a believer's baptism. If those have all been practiced by the Bible, then I don't understand why we would need it.
When you talk about people seeing the difference, like you gave an example of a doctor and an electrician.
Mhm.
That's speaking from an electrician point of view. Electrician, I didn't wake up and say I'm an electrician.
Right,
I was taught,
yes.
then I become proficient
Mhm.
in what I was
Mhm.
taught.
Mhm.
And the Bible says, like Christ told us, says, go ye into all the world, baptizing them and teaching them to observe everything
Right.
whatsoever I've commanded thee.
Right.
We don't do that anymore.
Huh.
We get people saved, and then if we get them baptized, and then if they join the church, and then if we don't disciple them, we don't teach them,
That's it.
and that's the reason why, like I say, the world can't see it. But you expect the church member to be what he says it is. When I go to do a barn or a house, they expect me to know the knowledge of
And be an electrician.
Yeah,
Yeah.
electrician.
Yeah.
They, if they see me
Plumber.
if they see me
Whatever.
looking into a plumbing pipe, they know that this his credentials. He ain't quite what he says.
Mhm.
On
Yeah.
Facebook, go, can I do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, if he's in there watching videos while he touches his lines. But I just, I thought about that and I thought, it would be a hard problem in my mind to tell one of them that have truly converted. Now that's the regenerate baptism. They've really made the change. They're walking through that door. Okay, let's just use an example of Michael.
Action.
No,
Oh,
Paul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
my cousin,
So where did he get saved?
in prison.
In prison.
No, wait a minute, before prison.
Before
He was
prison?
only about 17.
Yeah.
At home.
At home?
You know, I remember too.
So let's just say that he did get saved in prison
Okay.
and got baptized. And he walks up that aisle and says, I want to be part of this church. Now, we've done seen him come to the altar.
Yeah.
He's done been here in regular attendance. But he comes up here and says, I want to join this church. And he tells us exactly line for line, salvation, baptism, everything. Same as what we do. Why would we need to do that again?
Then it would be put to the church upon this
Profession.
brother's testimony.
Yep.
What's the pleasure of the church?
Mhm. To take him by state. That's always what I've always said. I don't understand the redoing things. That's a biblical standard. It's the same as what we've practiced.
And if they're content with it, they're satisfied.
Yeah, I agree with that. But there's many churches around right now that won't examine each person, and so everybody has to be baptized. Am I wrong? Everybody that joined the church that we were in at the time, it didn't matter where you came from, if they thought there was any difference at all, period, in that church and theirs, you got to be baptized, or they would not let you in. They didn't examine them to say, Roger, you got saved in a missionary Baptist church within 10 minutes of here. You got baptized in the canal.
It's Baptist faith.
Yeah, and you in a missionary Baptist church, and you got baptized in the canal across the road. You know, and tell that experience, and it's verbatim what we're doing today. But no, you can't do that. I want to know where the biblical standard is for recreating a Bible commandment that was already completed. Because that's where people, I think, get into questioning the thought of salvation. Need to do it again. And you can make people doubt enough about salvation or baptism that they'll try. They'll go back and say they're not real sure about their baptism. They're going to do it. And there's people that will say they're not satisfied.
Yeah.
Some of them, in doubt, do it again. But when we look at this, we need to know what biblically standard is about how we handle what comes in the door. Because we're going to see it, I promise you, we're going to see it. There's going to be people, and I don't know where Michael was baptized or whatever, but
I don't think he has been.
he's never been there.
Well, if you don't, you need to let him know, to find out if he knows why he should be baptized.
Right.
We need to be able to tell him why.
You know what the answer the churches are giving people right now?
To go to heaven.
No, it's simpler than that. You know what answer the churches are giving people about making them be baptized?
To be a member.
Because.
And become so.
That's what they think. Because.
Because.
Yeah.
So,
That's what we do. That's what we do. You got to be baptized because.
Yeah.
See, nobody else knows why. Nobody else understands enough about it why to explain it to one and break it down to ground nails to say, hey, God did it himself. He walked down to the Jordan and got in the water himself. Then he says that you are to do it even as I have done it. Is that not what he said?
To fulfill all righteousness.
Yeah. So that's grounds right there. I don't have to give you church doctrine, covenant, nothing. All I have to do is tell you the Bible says right there. From there, entering into the church by the covenant and what we believe, that's afterward. That's after we've completed the first two steps. But you're right. There is a big pothole that's never fixed of when people come in the door that wants to know. And I believe Michael has a desire to want to do this way because he knows what the other way is like. He done been there and done that. And he sees something here that draws him back, obviously, because he driving from where now? Rutledge? Where'd he move to?
He lives with us.
Oh, I thought he was gonna move over yonder.
He worked for
He
Oh, he's
works,
working on it.
Yeah.
Well, he was considering finding him somewhere over the way.
Yeah.
But even working nights, however many nights a week, and then getting it being here on Sunday, he's making that effort on his own. So
yeah.
it's very important that people know why they're needing to do this and where it comes into play, that it's not just us saying you need to and because, well, that's what we do. That's just how we do. No, I think that can't go. That won't fly. You'll run into one that'll get you. I promise. There'll be one come in that's got some guts about them enough to call you on it and say, well, you're going to show me where that's at and why. And they should. It shouldn't offend anybody to say, well, show, you believe this stuff? This is what you say is right? Show me. It's got to be in there.
Yeah.
If Karen wants to lay in the driveway and holler she can't see, show me. So,
something on the ladder. No, I seen some videos of baptisms,
Mhm.
baptism. And, you know, just, you know, how people kind of, you look at baptism as fully submerged.
Mhm.
This young man was being baptized, but he never would lay his head going in the water.
Oh.
This preacher he
fighting.
kept pushing 2, 3 times. He's gonna get his head wet, but instead he kept buckling his knees or floating. But he was determined not to put his head on that water.
That's good. Does anybody know, just trigger a random question I asked while I'm looking something up. Does anybody know in right now that if let's just say that Steve, we fly him to Africa on a mission trip, he's gone, and we needed to baptize somebody, who can do it?
Could a deacon do it?
I'm asking you all.
Ordained
You're,
person,
you're the member, huh?
ordained person.
Okay. So it needs to be an ordained person to do the baptism?
I think so.
That's what we accept.
Philip, did he baptize people? He was a deacon.
Yeah. I'm just
That's what we
asking.
accept.
Um,
Somebody ordained.
Yeah, so it currently says that membership candidacy right here, it says it's specific when it gets into it. I want to see exactly how it led that conversation. Give me 2 seconds. Oh yeah, the church shall vote to receive candidates for baptism who have received Jesus Christ as Savior by personal faith, who professes him publicly at any worship service, and who indicates a commitment to follow Christ as Lord. It shall be by immersion in water, and here's what it says. And it actually does not say deacon. Our current bylaw does not say this. It says a pastor or ordained minister that meets pastoral requirement of this church shall be authorized to administer baptism. We need to look at
That's
that.
something that's always was about.
Yeah. But normally the deacons could do it also. And so when you look at who can do it, now that's where the next question of doing it's going to come in, is when you pull up the video of somebody that says, yeah, I was saved and baptized, so, and they show it to you, and they've let church members do it, or your family, or your sister has come up and baptized you. Now we've got a problem, because that's not who is to be baptized.
I actually seen a video of my cousin.
Mhm.
They go to a big church. And she just worked at the church. She was just a secretary.
Mm-hmm.
But it showed her baptizing, you know,
Somebody
people
Yeah.
in a swimming pool.
Yeah.
It was-
Yeah.
I don't know where in the world they're getting, but you just, when somebody gets saved, you just take them right out. No matter who's there.
Yeah. Anybody, my outlook on it is that, you know, a parent of a child, anybody will help. As far as the helping side. We've done that here. At the river.
Some people, you know,
But this is
disabled
not,
or whatever.
yeah,
needs to
but
be
this is not the same when you come and say, I got baptized here, watch the video, and you see that 2 women baptized the grown man in the baptistry at the church they're coming from. So see, now we've got something to review and make a decision on. So that's why I'm getting into a lot of things we study. We need to know this stuff, number one. If we can't help nobody and teach knowledge to people if we don't know ourselves. But the word because is the trap we're in right now. The devil's liking us to be comfortable with just because that's what we do. You know, you think about it seriously, that's what our answer is to a lot of things, because that's what we do, because. And people that don't answer the question for people that are searching and looking and wondering, why do I need to do this? Why am I supposed to do this? Especially those that don't have a lot of biblical education, background, teaching, bringing up in church, things of that nature. They're not gonna be looking and searching that in the Bible. If they're reading the Bible, they're not digging for that information when they look. Anybody else got anything to say?
When we were little, we used to baptize each other in the river and the creek.
And I bet you'd hold them down longer than just 2 seconds, but
Yeah, we don't have
Depends on
needs,
who
you
they
know.
were.
Christy's had 2 water baptisms, but she's had 1,000,000 waterbed baptisms.
drown her in the bed.
He get on the waterbed and he act like he was baptized.
Yeah, that's it.
Uh-huh.
I hope this helps open the eyes to us understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it and where we're getting the reason for doing things. I hear people all the time say, I don't know why we need a cabinet when we've got the Bible. Well, the reason this came up in history was because when they got out, they realized everybody's doing everything and they're going all over the place. They're doing all kinds of stuff that is not in line, and it's not lining up to where we can uniformly have a unity between churches. And that's when the kick of the covenant started. That's where it really came to play. Anybody else got anything to add tonight?
I seen a preacher video, and he used 2 mic stands, but he come down off the pulpit, and they have, one of them open Bibles laying on the table.
Mhm.
And he says, now right here, he said, this is gonna be the church. And he says, this right here, this other one's gonna be the world. He says, world's just a little bit different than church.
Mhm.
And he said, a little bit at the time, he said, the world moved out here.
Mhm.
He said, the church moved here.
Mhm.
Church's claim was, I'm not like the world.
Mhm.
There's space.
Mhm.
Then he said, just a little bit more time, he said, the world was here. The church was here. And they still made the claim, I'm not like the world. And then he said, now, look at the other distance, where the church is this.
Mhm.
And that's a pretty good point.
Mhm.
The church has left the Bible.
Yeah.
And they're looking at this distance and saying, I'm not, sure, I believe the church is not like the world.
Mhm.
We're not following the world.
Mhm.
But then they don't look back and see how far that they left the Bible.
Yeah. Pastor recently in the area, I've seen him online preaching and just listened for a minute. And he made a very good point that he went into a family member's church somewhere out west. He was visiting family. He went to church with him. He said, first thing I went in, I couldn't see my seat. He said, I looked at them and said, tell somebody to turn the lights on. And they said, oh no, this is the way we have church. He said, it's not right. He said, because the Bible says that there is no darkness where the Lord's at, and there's no barrenness of life, because there can't be darkness and light in the same place. He said, that's why there's light, just like that. And he was saying, so we've now started having our church service in the dark. That's what he fired up on this. I mean, he was wide open. But his statement was, man, we've started having the church service in the dark. We turn all the lights off. We've got these specific spotlights, but you're sitting in pitch black dark. You can't read your Bible or nothing else. You're in pitch black darkness in the building. He said, and the Bible teaches us not to be in darkness. He said, it teaches us not to be anywhere near it. And now we're sitting in the church house doing it. That's right. How far do you move away? Anything else tonight?